Rachel. I'm going to try to do you a binding video from beginning to end. So this will be a long video, but maybe as you learn the technique, you just have to go back and look at pieces of it, and eventually you won't even need it. So anyway, when you were here yesterday, you saw I had a quilt down on the horse quilt down on the long arm frame, and I finished that up this morning. So I'm going to do binding for that quilt, and I'm going to walk you through the entire process that I do from beginning to end. So I probably had to turn this off and on about a dozen times to move around the room, but I'm starting out with how I figure out what I need. So after I got my quilt off and I made sure my edges were all trimmed up and as straight as I could get them, I measured the quilt. That's how you start. So my quilt's longer than I thought it was. It's 76 inches long by 60 wide. So how I figure out what I need is what I usually do is go on Google and I just type in binding calculator. And the first thing in the first site that pops up is called Quilter's Paradise. And that's where I go to figure out how much fabric I need. So I couldn't get my computer close to the camera because I've got it plugged up. That's why I don't have it right down here for you to see. But anyway, if you'll go to that site and scroll about halfway down the page, there's a place that says the enter the width of fabric, and it's automatically set at 43 inches. So you can just leave that at 43 because that's typically what you're going to have to choose from. Fabric off the bolt's 44 inches, and by the time you cut the selvage edge off, you end up with 43 inches. So just leave that alone. And then you go down below that, and there's a place to enter the width of your quilt and the length. So I've entered 60 by 76 there. Then it has a slot that says binding strip width, and it automatically puts 1.5 inches there. That's tiny. So I've changed that to 2.5. That's the width of the strips that I cut. So change that to 2.5, and then on the line below that there's a button that says calculate. So if you hit calculate, it's immediately going to tell you what you need. And if you'll scroll down a little more, there's 2 sections. One section is for regular binding, or what is just straight binding. That's the kind that's not biased, like I showed you yesterday. So regular binding, it wouldn't have any stretch to it, but the bias binding would, and bias is what I use. So I scroll down then to that second section, and it's going to tell you exactly what you need. It tells me that the length of the strips I need will be a total of 282 inches, and they add 10 inches to the measurement. So what it tells you is really all you need. If I took my 76 by 60 quilt in linear inches, that's 272 inches. So they add 10 inches to it. All right. And to get that 282 inches, what I need, it tells me, is a square that's 29 by 29. And I would have to have a 1/2 yard of fabric to get that square. So that should be all the information you need to start cutting. So here's my fabric. I chose this red because it matches one of the borders in the quilt. It's actually the fabric I used for that. So what I'm going to do is cut a square as close to 29 inches as I can get. It don't have to be exact. It needs to be at least that. Okay, I don't know if you can tell from the camera, but I had a little mishap there. My camera fell over. So anyway, I'm kind of starting over, but I'm got my red fabric laid out here, and I'm going to cut me a square that's 29 inches. So I've laid it out here on my board, and this is big enough that I'm going to have to go by the lines on my mat, not on my ruler. So I've lined it up here on the edge, and these lines. And I've lined my ruler up here to my 29 inches. And I'm just going to slice that off of there. Okay. Now, so then what I end up with is 29 inches by the whole width of the fabric, which is 43. So I don't need that much. So I'm going to fold this thing the other way. Sorry, I heard something outside my window, a big jet. Okay. So I'm going to fold this thing the other way. And we'll cut it 29 that way. But before we do, we need to cut the selvage edge off because you don't want to use that. Okay. I'm going to come down here and cut off that edge. And it's about that much. Get rid of that. It's one of the few things I do throw away. Okay. And now, let's see. I don't have much room on my board, so I'm going to flip my... I ordinarily wouldn't turn this around, but I've got a lamp in the way. Plus, I would probably be too close to the camera to cut on that other side. So I'm going to turn it around, and again, I'm going down here to my 29-inch mark. And slice that off. Alright. So this piece I don't need. And I should end up with a square. Not close to it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. So there's my, this is going to be my binding. Now we'll turn the camera off for just a few minutes and I'm going to go over to the ironing board and iron this as flat as I can. You know, I told you yesterday ironing is really important. And I'm going to show you another little secret. And you might think I'm crazy, but it works. One, I've got these little spray bottles. They're like they mist. They don't spray, they mist. I just keep going. But what I've got in here, you know, you can buy starch, and I've got starch and all these things, and they work good. There's this thing, well, there's this thing you can buy at some stores. It's called Mary Ellen's Best Press, and it works really good, but it's like super expensive. I'm going to show you what I use, and I put in this bottle, and you'll, don't judge me. It's vodka. And so if you ever see me going in the liquor store in Marion, I'm just going in to get this. And it has to be potato vodka. I don't know if you can see that right here. Because potatoes are starch. So that's how you get like some more natural starch. It makes it stiff, but it don't leave that film. So anyway, I'm just sharing that with you. I don't know how you feel about it. So I usually spray a little bit on there. And it's really good about taking the wrinkles out. I feel like I need a disguise to go in there and buy that stuff. Okay. So that bottle just sprays and sprays. Now, I don't know if you remember yesterday, we did that fold from one corner to the other. So I'm going to pull it back here, and I'm just going to fold. I usually try to kind of line this top corner up. It won't match exactly. But there we go. And then I crease that fold. This is where your bias comes in. This is a long piece, so I've got to pull it up on here. Okay. And then where I made that fold, remember we bring it down to meet that other corner, when we get done, we're basically going to have a big old triangle. There we go. Now, we could keep folding it that way, but it gets to be too much for your rotary cutter to cut through. So that's 4 layers to cut through, and that's really about all you can get accurate with. So now I'm going to turn the camera off. We're going to move back over to the cutting board. Okay, I'm back over to the cutting board. Here's our triangle of fabric. Now I want to make sure you cut on the right side of this thing. So if you look at your triangle, the 2 short sides, this side, it's obviously a fold, but it's just one fold. But this other side of the triangle, it has 2 folds. This one's got a fold, and this one's got a fold. Okay, that's the corner you're going to cut off. So, however you line this up, I'm right-handed. So what I do is I cut this and then I flip it around. Or you can, I don't know, you might find a different way. So what I do is I take one of the fine lines on my mat and I line it up with this bottom, which is straight now. And I make sure that's lined up, and I'm just getting a little bitty strip, just enough to get rid of the fold. Okay, so down here's my single fold, up here's my double fold, and that's what I'm cutting off. All right, here we go. My blade is dull, so let me see. I can tell when it misses a little spot. And here we go. Now, let's get me another blade. Okay. Alright, so there's our little folds gone. Now I need to get this flipped over. I need to keep this straight, but I'm going to flip it over because it's easier for me to cut from this side. Okay. There we go. Got it good and straight. Now, it's the same side we cut on, but we're going to start cutting 2.5-inch strips. 2.5. Make sure that went through. I should have changed my blade before I started this video. Okay, the first strips you cut's always the longest. As you go down, they're going to be shorter. Okay, 2.5 again. I'm doing this twice just to make sure I didn't miss anything. That one cut, and I'm going to show you a little trick I do when the blade gets dull. And you really ought to change it, but if you're in the spot and you can't, I line it up. There's my 2.5. And knowing that my blade is dull, this doesn't always give you the best results, but I'll kind of rock my blade back and forth like this. That way if you miss something, you're coming back and hitting it again. So that usually gets it. Alright, I'm going to go down this whole strip. You'll get down there to the very tip end, and you'll know that it's just getting too short. It won't do you much good. You'll have leftover strips, so you need to start your little box or something to keep your strips in. Sometimes I take strips, it don't matter if they're the same color or not, and I sew them together and make a binding out of it, and it actually looks pretty cool. Okay, so then I get down to these little triangles that you can't do nothing with. I just throw that in scrap. Okay. Now, next we'll move over to the sewing machine and sew these together. But I try to kind of keep them lined up like this, and I start sewing the longest strips together first. You get more out of more, less intersections that way. So maybe by the time you get down to this little bitty short piece, you really won't even have to use it. So I start sewing together with the long ones. And when I start sewing my binding on my quilt, I make sure I'm starting with that end too. So I usually just stack them up. I'll know that I'm using the long ones first. Okay. So now we're going to move over to the sewing machine. Okay, I'm over here at the sewing machine and I'm not quite ready to sew yet. But while I was setting up, I came up with all these tips that I thought I wish I'd have told you yesterday. We were talking about thread and these kind of spools. And I was changing my thread and thought of this. If you end up with, it took me a long time to figure this out. If you end up with thread that's on a spool like this, the bottom of this spool pops out. You can pull down on it and it pops, and then you can push on it and it goes back. So when you get it, you have to pull that down because the thread winds around there. That's what keeps it in place. So when I put my thread up, I put it down in that little groove. I don't know if you can see that, but it has a groove. You can wind your thread on and snap it down on it. And that keeps it in place so you don't have thread tails hanging out everywhere. And then another thing I do when I put my bobbins up, this is just a thought, you can get these teeny tiny little ponytail holders. They're baby ponytail holders. And gosh, you can get a million of them for almost nothing. I know you can get them at Sally's. You can probably get them at Walmart. But they are perfect to put on your bobbin to hold the thread in place. So you don't, even if you drop it, then you're not going to lose all your thread. So I've used those for years and years. And I also have, this is not necessary, but I'll show you anyway. This little thing, I can't forget it. I don't remember what it's called now, but I could look it up. But this goes down in the top of a thread spool. And then you can put your bobbin on top of it. You can actually put two bobbins on top of it. And then you always got your bobbin with your thread that, color you used it with. So I've used those for years. Anyway, that's a handy tip I thought I'd tell you. And one more thing. I've got my big ironing spot over there, but beside my table, I keep just one of these little TV tables that I covered as ironing spots, so if I don't have to get up and down all the time. And I've got this itty bitty little mini iron. You can buy all kinds of expensive things. They'll sell you anything on Amazon for a fortune, but I paid $12 for this little thing over at Walmart. It works like a charm. So I'll just keep that right here, but on my little table for a quick little iron up, the intersections where this binding goes together. But anyway, if you're ever looking for something like that to keep handy close by, it's not huge, that little thing's great for 12 bucks. And then I keep one of these little silicone pot holders over here that I keep it on, just so I don't burn the house down over here. Anyway, now I'm going to finish setting up and I'll be right back and we'll start sewing binding. Okay, I'm struggling a little bit to get this camera to point in just the right direction so you can see what I'm doing. But we're going to try. And remember the feet that I had yesterday? I've got one more. I used, during binding, I used my 1/4 inch foot that's got the little guide on the side of it. And then I used my zipper foot. But in this first stage, I usually use this other foot. It's a 1/4 inch foot too. It just don't have a guide on the side of it. But I can see around it real well, and I just like it too. So I'm going to put it on my machine. I don't use that other 1/4 inch guide during this because I'm not going up against something. I'm sewing on top of something. And when you do that, this little guide wants to get caught on things. So I usually don't use it in this part. So now this is red on both sides. You can't tell any difference. It's the same on both sides. Sorry. So this is one of those that's a little bit harder to put together. If it's obvious which side is the front side, this is easier. But, okay, so the first one's not hard. So we'll start out and button it up just like it's going to fit together, just like a jigsaw puzzle. And we assume that we have a right side. If it was a right side and wrong side, you'd put your right sides together. So I'm going to flip this one over. And I line this up, and I hope you can remember, and it's hard to see here. I offset that by about 1/4 of an inch, and I just eyeball it so that this little corner sticks off 1/4 of an inch, and over here this little corner is sticking off 1/4 inch. So that gives me a place to line up from right here at this point where they come together down to this point where they come together, and sew it together. So put the needle down, and I butt that little area up right in that little V shape against my needle, and put my needle down. Oops. Okay, and then get started. Alright, once you get started and you've got a grip on it, you're going to aim for that other little V shape down here where things come together. So you can just eyeball it. I'm trying to keep my arm out of the way so you can see what's going on. And, you know, slow down when you get down there, and you'll be able to hit the mark a little bit better. And let's go on off of it and cut your thread. Okay, now you've got it together. So there's what it looks like. Remember, you got these little dog ear things. I usually don't worry about them, but if they bother you, you can cut those off. Now, when we sew our, remember this was the 2 longest strips. Now, we've got to kind of keep this seam up here where I can see it when I start to do my next piece. And get my next piece. Okay. So now you don't want to get things twisted. Make sure everything's flat and lay in the same direction. But you have to remember, this is what I was telling you, you have to remember that whether this seam is facing up or down. So I've got mine facing up. You wouldn't have to worry about this if your fabric had a right side and wrong side. You don't want to get started and you have one facing up, one facing down. You'd have to rip something out. Okay, so these are facing up. I'm going to make sure that when I sew this one together, it's going to be facing up. So there's the way they'll butt up. Remember, you would put your right sides together, offset it by that 1/4 inch on each little corner. Again, just eyeball it. The main needle down. Main thing here to keep it as accurate as you can is to go from that little V to that little V. If you'll hit those marks, whether you've got a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch or what, it'll work. Just try to get from that V to the next V. Okay, got it started. Make sure your little edges is lined up here. And here we go. Now, I know my machine has that laser light on it. Sometimes I use it and sometimes I don't, but I know yours doesn't have that, so I'm not going to use it. Now, I didn't make that one perfect. I don't know if you can see it, but I did not get it perfect. It don't matter. It's not off enough to matter. If it was really bad, I'd rip it out. Okay, so I know that. I'm going to go down here and find this other seam. Alright, seam is up. Let's go down through here and make sure. And look at that. I messed up. This seam is facing up. That seam is facing down. I messed up. See, I told you I do it all the time. So I'm going to rip that one out. Start over. Just have to think it out as you go. I make all kinds of mistakes. Now, if I can find the seam ripper. Okay. I'll get my seam ripper over here. So while we're in the seam ripping mode, you mentioned to me yesterday, you said, show me how to use that thing, and I totally forgot about it. But here's the two main kinds of seam rippers, and both have their good and their bad. As far as sharpness and ripping a seam, I like this kind better. It's cheap. You can probably get it for $1 at Walmart. These are a little more expensive. They, to me, just aren't quite as sharp, so it's a little bit harder to rip out with them. But they have on the end of this little rubber tip, and down here a little rubber tip. And what that does, it works like a pencil eraser. Now I'll show you in a minute. You can use that and get the threads off the fabric really easy. So I'll just show you both of those a little bit in action. But this, I'm going to have to rip this out. That was just my mistake. So let's see. You can see this. There's a couple ways to do it. I mean, you can just go down through there on one side, ripping them out. And then on this side, you can get a hold of it and pull the whole thing out at one time. That's one way to do it. A lot of people just, they get it started, if they can get one end of it started. Now, I'll probably mess this up too, because I don't usually do it this way. But if you can put this in there, this little ball is meant to keep you from ripping your fabric. It doesn't really work that way. I've tried it and I still rip it. That's why I don't normally do it this way, unless I'm in a hurry and got a whole lot to do. But you put the ball down in the seam so the sharp end's sticking up. And then if you can hold it just right, you can just go down through there and rip those seams out like that. It's kind of like a zipper. You hear it like a zipper too. Okay. I don't usually do that, but I just wanted to show you. So then, you've got all these little threads hanging out where we ripped apart. This little eraser just wipes them away. I mean, just like a pencil eraser. Now that part I do like, because it's really good at getting those threads off. Alright, that's the difference in that. Now, I need to pay better attention and do this right this time. Alright, that's up. So what I have to do is think about it. I wasn't thinking enough. Which way is going to make this be up? Okay. So there, like that. Now, they've got to face up when they're done. So what I did that other time was I flipped this over when I should have flipped it under, because then the seam would be facing up. All right, so this time I flipped it under. Let's try that. Some of the stuff's just trial and error. Okay. Needle down. Put it up in the V. Foot down. Here we go. I got it started. A handy dandy little awl or punch or whatever you call. I think I just got this at Walmart in the hardware section or something, but it's come in really handy. There we go. Now let's see if I did it right. I usually check this all through sewing it to make sure. So there I'm up. Slide down through here. And it's up this time, thank goodness. So now I've got to go down to the next one. And I'm going to keep in mind, if I want it to be up, yes, okay. If I want it to be up, I've got to flip this under, not over. Hope this works. Okay. 1/4 inch offset, needle down, butt it up in the V. Heading towards the other V. Okay, I'm going to check it again. Let's see. The last seam was up. Slide down there, and that seam is up. Thank goodness it is. Come on down to the end, keeping everything the same direction. Oops. Now, I'm going to keep this video flowing. I'm going under again. through this whole thing. You don't have to watch it all because this will be really boring to just watch me do this binding, because this is for a big quilt. But I thought I'm going to keep it going. I may make some mistakes along the way. And if I make some mistakes, then you can learn from my mistakes. Okay. So if I don't, then hey, you don't have to watch this part of the video anymore. Okay, so that one's up. Slide down through there. That one's up. Good. So as long as I can keep that going, we'll be okay. A few more. See, my strips are getting smaller as we go. I flipped it under. Offset in 1/4 inch. Line the needle up with the V. Alright, that one's up. That one's up. Good. Next one. Okay, flip it under. 1/4 inch offset. Line up the V. Whoops, my needle came threaded. See there? Something happened along the way. I'll make sure that thing lays there and I don't lose my direction. Something's wrong. My thread is stuck. When you're threading your machine too, always make sure your foot is up. If your foot is down, that means your tension discs are tight and your thread won't go through it right. So make sure your foot's up when you're threading. Alright, remember I got that fancy thing that threads itself, thank goodness, because my eyes are terrible. Okay, needle down, button up against my V, and go. Back up to my last one. Seam was up. This seam is up. Good. I think I'm on a roll. A few more strips. Flip it under. Offsetting my 1/4 inch. You probably hear me saying this stuff in your sleep. Okay, button it up against the V. And heading towards the other V. Okay, they're both up. See, they're getting shorter now. I can see them close by. Alright, strips are getting short. And I keep dropping them. Flip it under. Offset. And butt up the V. I just learned to say these things that help me along the way. Seams are up. Very good. I think I got them a little mixed up over here. It's okay. I'm getting down to some really little ones. Sometimes when they get real little, I stop and I'll go over to my cutting board and I'll start measuring and make sure I got enough, and not even use those little bitty ones. think they really add in more than 10 inches when they give you those measurements. Alright, that seams up. Yeah, I'll get down these little bitty pieces. I may not need them, but I'm going to go ahead and do them just in case. And then you always have a little bit left over, and I keep all of it. You never know when you not need just a little bitty piece. I don't know, for a pot holder or something, or a table runner, placemat, all kinds of pillows. I make some pillows. I should show you how to do that. Make some zipper pillows. Okay, and I wrap the back right here. Just, I think we'll skip those. I think we're going to stop here. I'll do this one here, and then I'm not going to do this like two little bitty ones. I don't think we'll need it. Make sure I got that right. So we'll put it under. When they get, to me, when they get small, they get a little harder to, for some reason, I think it'd get easier to manhandle here. Okay. Offset. Okay. Okay, we're done sewing them together. Now we're going to go to the iron and do the ironing part. Okay, we're at the iron. Now, I'm going to leave the camera rolling this whole time too. And I see one or two of these that I didn't get real perfect. They're not lined up perfect, but I think it's close enough to go with it. So all of these little bitty seams, I open them up flat. I don't do them to one side. I open them up. Alright, go down through here and do every one of them that way. Open them up like that. I don't know if you can see, this fabric is so bright. From my perspective on that camera, it looks so red, I don't know if you can see it. But I'm opening them up. Just press it down. On this fabric, that iron discolors it a little bit, but then it just goes away. I don't know why it does that. Okay, open it up. And again, this is where those little dog ear things on there, if they bother you, just take your scissors and whack them off like that. They just don't bother me. I just pretend they're not there. Okay. Almost done. Couple more. Last one. Gosh, they're hard to get a hold of sometimes. Okay, now let's go all the way back down here to this end. Okay, now we're just going to fold it in two, like we did yesterday, this long ways. You might hear them talking on YouTube. They call this hot dog style. When you fold something long ways, it's hot dog style. Okay, so just fold it in half. Iron it down. Now they make some fancy tools that holds this in place so you can iron it. But goodness gracious, all you're doing is folding it over and ironing it. So it's not worth going and buying a bunch of fancy tools. Go all the way down that strip. folding it in two. This is where you really see those dog ear things stick out. Keep it going. And there's all kinds of fancy big irons out there too. You'll see when if you're watching Missouri Star, they got that fancy iron that lifts itself up. But I've read some reviews said that that thing didn't last long. So, and gosh, I think it costs over $100. This old iron here I've had for years and years and years. I don't think they make them anymore. It's an Auric, and you can use it with a cord or without a cord. My old latch is messed up, so I'm leaving a cord on it. But I've got two of them. They are workhorses. If you could ever pick one up at a yard sale or something, I'd highly recommend it. I've had that and used it since my kids were just little. Okay. I can flip this little switch right down here and just pick it up, whoops, without the cord. And then when you set it back on that base, it starts reheating. And it works just as good. Now, when you're ironing stuff and making quilts, generally, you don't use steam. There might be a time when you do, but it's just really not needed with this cotton usually. And that's where I'd use my spray instead of fooling with putting water in the iron. I can put water in my iron and it just don't last long. I'm filling it up every few minutes, so that's just frustrating. About the only time I put water in my irons when I'm ironing clothes, which is not very often. I try not to buy clothes that need to be ironed. Ugh, I'm just not into that. When you do your masks though, the ironing is going to be super important too, just like it is in quilting. Okay, last little bit here. There's a lot of prep to get ready to put binding on the quilt. There we go. Now it is ready to sew on. Sometimes you have a whole bunch of this left over. I keep little pieces of cardboard winded up on. I know some people use toilet paper rolls to roll it on. That way it don't get wrinkled, or paper towel rolls or something like that. But anyway. Okay, now we're done with that. It's time to sew it on the quilt. So we're going to move back over to the sewing machine and get to work. Okay, I've moved my camera back just a tad. I want you to watch me do this whole binding on this quilt. This is the quilt I had on the long arm yesterday, the horse quilt. So this is a big project, so I need a little room. I hope you can see okay. And I've got my red binding here that we made earlier. So here's my top corner. I don't know why I always start on the right hand side. Just, I don't know, maybe because I'm right-handed. So I'm going to come down maybe halfway, maybe not quite halfway. That's where I'm going to start. Now I've put my handy dandy little 1/4 inch foot on with the guide on the side of it. Let me find the end of my binding. Now I hope you can see what I'm doing. And here, I've got the wrong end. So here's the end. It has started with the little short pieces. So I'm going to go to the other end where I started with those long pieces. I'm going to start with that end. And hope we don't end up with one of these little joining things in a corner. If so, we might stop and fix that. That'll be probably good. You'll see that happen, but I hate for it to happen. Okay, so I'm going to leave a long tail. This is probably about a foot. And I'm just going to leave that and start sewing there. And I'm just laying it down flush with the edge of my quilt. And I'm going to move it over here. Ooh, this is heavy too. When you're binding a whole quilt, big quilt, kind of have to bunch it up and let it roll beside you. Okay, so I'm putting this under my foot. Everything's lined up on the side, raw edges together. And I'm going to butt it up against the side of that guide and put my foot and my needle down. Okay, so got my long tail out here. That's where we'll join it in the end. So here we go. I keep my strips over here on the right side, my quilt on the left side, so they don't get all tangled up. You just have to keep moving this whole big thing along with you. I could have made a little bitty sandwich like I did yesterday, and we could have done that, but I want to see the whole big quilt going together. In reality, it's all the same. They all have 4 corners and 1 joining, so it's just a bigger thing to manhandle than we did yesterday. That string get caught. I just about bet you my bobbin will run out before we get to the end of this, because I don't think it had much on it. And again, here's those little dog ear things, I call them. I just act like they're not there. But if they bother you, just snip them off. Guess what? I messed up. I'm going to have to rip all that out. I just started on the front of the quilt. Exactly what I told you not to do yesterday, right? Because if I did, I would flip it over to the back and my other set of seams would be on the front, and I don't want that. So all of that stuff I just did, I'm going to have to rip out. So you get to see me make all the mistakes. And so here's one of those examples where when you're ripping something out and it's a long thing, it is good to rip it out like that kind of zipper method I showed you. So, well, all tangled up in a knot. So once you get it started, it's not too bad. I've got that little ball that I want to put down in there. And try not to rip my fabric. Keep the pointy thing up. And here it's zipping. Even though it is easy, but you got to be careful because it's sharp and it'll still cut the fabric. I have just zipped way down through there, but this is a quilt I'm making for somebody else, and I don't want to accidentally mess something up. Okay, almost there. Guess you can see this. I'm trying to look at the camera and see what you can see. So I have sewed probably for 45 or 50 years, and I still make these crazy mistakes. So don't go bad when you make a mistake. That's how you learn. Okay. Alrighty. that. So now, to do this the right way, we're going to flip it over to the back. This is back. It's got all those horses on it. Okay. Now, starting over. Down halfway or so on the quilt. Making sure I have the long strips first. I do. Leaving me a tail, a good foot, maybe not quite a foot, 8 inches, something like that, of a long tail there left over. You know, I told you when I get to the end, I wish I'd left more and end up ripping a little bit out. So maybe you should just leave about a foot there. Okay, starting over. Alright, here we go again. That's a lot of stuff to move along with you. And again, when I'm putting this down here, you know, we did it on the bias. It's stretchy, but I'm not stretching on it. I'm just laying it there normal, I guess. Not floppy, but not stretched. I'm coming up on that corner, so I need to slow down a little bit. And when you get near the end of one of these, this big heavy part of the quilt wants to fall off of the table, but you got to kind of keep it up here with you. If you don't, the weight of that thing just starts pulling on everything and it'll mess you up. So I'm getting down here to the end, and remember, I want to stop about a 1/4 inch from the edge, from this edge. So if you need to, you can bring your pencil over here and make your little mark. Know where to stop. I usually just eyeball it. I'll put my little pointer down here where I think a 1/4 inch is. And I'll keep going, and I'll bring my needle right to that point and I stop. Okay. Raise your foot. Flip the quilt around. Now you can let it fall off if you need to. And you have that corner pointing straight at you. And you're just going to put your foot back down and sew directly off of it. Okay. So what that did was gave you a 45-degree angle to help you with the next part. So when I'm turning my corner, and this is where I said I have words I say in my mind to make this happen, and that's up, down, and around. So I pull my, this would be the up direction. So this is getting ready to be the top of my quilt. So I pull this up so that when it's up this way, it's going to be a straight line up through here. That puts this on a 45. Man, I hope you can see this. I don't know if my camera's angle is right. And then down this way. I ought to hold this up here, hold it in place, and pull this down so that it's straight down that line. So then it should be squared up here. If it's off just a tad, I usually raise this up and just work it to where it kind of sticks up in the middle and looks right. It might not be exactly square, but that one looks pretty good. So that was up, down, and here's the around. I hold that down and I flip my quilt around. This is hard sometimes. You got to keep that together while you're getting it up here under the foot. Put your needle down. Well, I'm not going to raise my needle up. You can do it that way, but I like to start down in there a few stitches. So I usually come in a 1/4 inch, put my foot down, put my needle down, and then I hit my reverse. I know you can't see that from me. I hit my reverse and I back up from the needle back to the edge of the quilt. Just a few stitches. And that just helps lock everything in place. Okay, when I get to the edge, I stop, and then I'm going to come forward. Sorry, I had to put my hand here. Let's get this thing going. And then we're just going to zip down the whole side of this quilt. I think sometimes bindings, if you get your colors right, they really make a quilt stand out. Or if you get it wrong, it really make it look weird. I can show you one that I did wrong. Maybe sometime if you're here, I'll show you that. I had a little thing on the back of the couch in my bedroom that I did a pillow and a little throw. And it was really cute. Until I put this hideous binding around it, and now I hate it. So I'm tempted to take that binding off, both of them, and redo it. I just haven't done it. Some people, color just comes natural to them. I'm not one of those people. So I usually have to think about it for a long time and try a lot of things before I decide what I'm going to use. We're coming up on that next corner. Okay, getting close. Whoops. Alright, I got off here. I went over that way a little bit too far. So I really need to get back on track. So what I'm going to do is cut my thread. Raise my foot. And I'm going to back up just a little bit. Put it back down. I'm just going to sew right back down over what I did because I was over here to the edge too close. And this will back my stitches back up where they should be. I do that pretty often. Okay, that got me right back on track. Now again, you're going to mark a 1/4 inch from this edge and stop there. Okay. Raise your foot, not your needle. Raise your foot. Oops. Turn this to the corners facing you. I didn't go far enough. Alright, I can tell when I do that. I'm going to have to go a couple more stitches. You should be, when you turn it, you should be looking directly at that corner. I'm going to take one more stitch. Man, I'm just off today. Okie dokie. Alright, perfect. Okie dokie. Now we're going to do our up, down, and around again. Up, down, whoops, down, hold it there, and around. Up, down, and around. Alright. Again, come down in there about a 1/4 inch or so. Come thread out of place. Okay, about a 1/4 inch. Put your foot and your needle down. Back up to the edge. Alright, then go forward. Okay, here we go down another side. I remembered too, I have some more videos and I'm going to share them with you. When I was making that fundraiser quilt for Michelle, it was for breast cancer. I made a few videos on that too. So they're all on my old YouTube channel. So I'm going to send you links to all that. Whoops, I'm spinning a wheel here on something. Every once in a while something gets stuck. I don't know what that was about. Just see if it'll go. Oh yeah. Okay. I don't know if you saw the, well, the quilt I had earlier. It's got the tie-dye binding. That's for my niece Elizabeth, and this one is for her sister Hannah. So I'm hanging, I held on to the other one so I can give them to them at the same time. Another thing you need to think about doing is signing all your quilts and taking pictures of them, because years down the road you're not going to remember them, and they're not going to remember where they got them maybe. So I've got several different ways I sign my quilts, and I had pictures of a lot of my quilts, and last year I had a cell phone die and I lost all my pictures. So I was devastated, but I got some of them back, but not nearly all of them. And it's amazing when I look back over the years or think about it, how many quilts I've made for people I've done my own, forgot about. Sometimes people remind me. I'm working on another quilt right now. I always have 3 or 4 quilts going at the same time. I usually have one that I'm piecing, one that's on a long arm, and one that I'm hand quilting. And sometimes one on a treadle. So right now I've got one started. It's king size and it's over there. I've got all my squares ready. It's just, you know, I make that for my cousin. He said he wanted old-timey quilt, just squares and scraps. So that's what he's getting. And I literally dug through my scrap bins and dug out a bunch of fabric and cut out squares. Some people don't like fancy things. Alright, this is corner number 3. Stop a 1/4 inch from the edge. Gotta remember to leave that needle down. Okay. Maybe one more stitch. That's good. Okay. Just up there hard and manhandle it. Up. Whoops. It's crooked or something. Okay, up, down, holding it, and around. When I get here, I'm usually counting down the corners, wishing the last one was here. Okay, start in a 1/4 inch or so, put your needle down, back up to the edge. I'm sorry, I know my arms are blocking your view some. And then start going forward. My machine needs a little push to get going forward when I'm at an edge. Hopefully yours won't be like that. Okay. I know you can't see good, but all I'm doing is lining it up on the edge and sewing down through there. Alright, I did that thing where I got over too far. So I'm cutting my thread, backing up just a little. Starting over. And get this back on track. It's a good thing I made all these mess up today. You can learn from my mess ups. Now I'll tell you something else I've done too. With these big quilts, man, sometimes they're hard to man out, especially if you were free motion quilting, like on your machine. They're so big. I have just brought in fold-up tables, you know, like you'd use for a cookout or something, and set them up all around my sewing machine so that when it's going out through there, it's not just falling off on the floor. It's that table supporting it a little bit. That helps it from pulling on your needle and stuff. So far, we haven't hit a seam in the corner. I shouldn't have said that. Next one will get me. Now it looks like we'll make it because there's a seam here and then there's not one until on down in there. So we're going to make all four corners without getting a seam. Thank goodness. Here we are at the last corner. And look at that. Man, I have barely got enough. Look at that. So, you know, I had left these two little pieces that I didn't sew on. I could have needed those. So I left them laying there. But I think we'll make it. So, okay. Stopping a 1/4 inch before the end. Wouldn't you know it? My bobbin ran out. I think I can make it to the end before it completely runs out, because mine gives me a little warning. So hopefully I can get down here and off this corner. Okie dokie. Now before I can finish that corner, in that little bit, I'm going to have to run the bobbin. And that just in case. Okay. I hate winding bobbins. But you can't sew without them, can you? I've always said I wish I made bobbins as big as a spool of thread. So you just stick a whole spool down in there. Wouldn't that be cool? I don't know why they don't get something like that. Now we wait. I didn't show you on my bobbins. Well, and there's different kinds of bobbins. There's metal ones and there's plastic ones. There's thread in it. But anyway, shucks. These metal ones have holes all the way around it. But these plastic ones only have like one little hole right there. So when you're winding your bobbin, I should have showed you on that one. You want to put your thread, hold your bobbin and take the end of your thread, put it down inside the bobbin and out through that hole. so that you have that string coming out on the outside like that. So it goes down in the bobbin, out through that hole on the side. Okay, you can see that. Then wherever your bobbin winder is, when you get it, mine's up here. If you can just put it on it, and then hold that string up in the air straight out from where your bobbin winds, and start it. And then just for a second, then stop, and then clip that little thread off, and then start it back again. That's the easiest way to do a bobbin. Okay, but we got it now. Forge it. It'll take this video forever to upload, because it's going to be a long one. Okay. Remember to make sure your foot's up when you're threading your machine. Okay. Alright, we sewed off of that corner. Now we go up. Well, no, we didn't quite make it. Look, I ran out before I got to that corner. I thought I made it, but I didn't. So I finished that little bit. Alright, sew off the corner. Alright, up, down, and around. Alright. Starting a 1/4 inch down. Backing up to the edge. And going forward. Now, let's go down through here just a little ways. Now, let's stop and look. We got a big long distance here. So we want to have, I'm going to say 8 to 12 inches. I'd say 8 inches is good to leave to join it. So let's keep on going. And I do see that I have a seam right here where it was joined. And there's one right here. So what I wanted to do is to join in between that somewhere. So I'm going to look and see where that lands, right about middle ways of my gap. So that's good. So I'm going to come down. Be sure I get by that one, but stop before I get to that one. So I'm going to stop about right here. Alright, now I've got my thread. I'm going to take it out of the machine. Alright. Now we've got all that down till we've got that much room to bring this thing together. And you know we have to do this over at the ironing board. So I'm going to turn the camera off and I'm going to move over and get set up and I'll turn it back on. Okay, I'm over to my iron and we're going to bring this thing together now. Okay, so in my gap, I'm going to do this about halfway through my gap. I want to bring them kind of together, fold this over and fold this one over. I'll get rid of this tail in a minute. And just kind of fold them over on themselves. You see there's a gap in the middle. I want you to bring that together to where it's about 1/4 inch. I'd say at least 1/4 inch, between 1/4 and 1/2 inch of gap right there. And you're going to leave that gap, okay? And you're going to iron it in place so that it's nice and crisp. Okay. Now, you get my pins. Okay, now this is where we talked about these creases looking like a cross. So you're going to take this tail and you're going to open it up, separate it, so now that it's out flat, not folded, like this. Okay? And you're going to see where you've got the crease. This is the crease where we originally ironed it long, hot dog style we called it, and then a cross where I just now put a crease in it. Alright, so we've got a cross on there. We're going to lay that down with the right side up, so it makes it bunched up a little bit. Now this side, it's going to have the same thing on it. Okay, when I open it up, it's got both creases. And here's where you have to be careful that you're not twisting one. Sometimes I still do it, and that's okay. You have to kind of get this corner over here with you so you can work with it. But you've got the right side up, and right here you're going to have your right side down on top of it, and you're going to cross them like this in an X, so that your these creases line up as exact as you can get them. So open them both out flat. You should have your creases across should match, and your creases this way should match, and they should be flat on top of each other. If you can see that in this video. Okay, now I'm just going to put some pins in here to hold this in place until we can get back over to the machine and stitch it down. Sometimes I put 4 or 5 pins in this thing because I don't want it to go anywhere. It's hard sometimes to get that to match up. Once you get it there, and I got that one there pretty easy, you don't want to lose it. So, and you got to be thinking, where am I going to sew? Where do I have to sew from here? Do I sew from this? You know, we've got those V's again in the corner. Do I sew from this corner to this corner, that V? Or do I sew this corner? Sometimes you just have to think about it in your mind that when you open that up, which way is going to work. One way will work and one way definitely won't work. Okay? So if you're got it laying here looking at it like this, you're going to be sewing the way, if you look at this down through here, you're going to sew the one that's parallel to it. Goes the same way. This goes this way, this one goes this way. Because see, one of them goes that way. You don't want that one. Okay, so we want this one. I'm going to try to, and when you're putting your pins in it, try to think which one am I going to sew from, and will the pins be in my way. So like right now, I'm going to sew from here to here. This pin head is directly in my way. So probably what I want to do is turn my pin around so that I can get it started before I have to pull that out, and that head won't be in the way. So like that, I'll have a little space to get started before I have to pull my pins out. Okay, gosh, I hope this makes sense. I'm going to try to move the camera just a little bit closer so that you can see that. I don't know if that makes a bit of sense on this camera or not. But we're going to sew from this corner to this corner. Alright, I'm going to move back over to the machine. Okay, I'm back over to the machine, and I'm putting my needle down, and I'm going to sew from, like I showed you over there, kind of parallel, the parallel seam with the side of the quilt. So from this V down to this V. So I'm going to butt this up against my needle, put my foot down, and I'm going to sew down to this V down here, all the way across. I know this is hard for you to see. Okay. Hopefully I've got it started. It's hard when this thing is hanging off the table and pulling on it. Shoot, I pulled it loose. Okay, now, that's a lot of weight to be holding on the binding. Okay, so now I'm going for that one V down to the other V. hope you know what I'm talking about, the V's where they, like we did on the binding. Okay, once you do that, you take your pins out. You should be able to open this up and see that it's going to be in the right direction. And nothing's twisted, it lays flat, except you've got all this bulk in here to cut out. So, I'm not going to show this on camera. You can pick up your scissors and cut it, or take it over and cut it with your rotary cutter. But where you've got that seam that we just sewed, you're going to, the seam is right here, you're just going to come over and cut 1/4 inch over, just like everything else. Just be careful when you're cutting that. You don't want to accidentally cut into your quilt or something. So it might be better to just hold it up in the air like this and eyeball it. That's what I'm going to do. And just cut it, leaving you 1/4 inch. And then we'll go back over to the ironing board. Well, I don't even know if we'll do that. Let's see. Okay. We'll turn on a little mini iron here. Alright, I'm turning on my little miniature iron. It's over here beside me instead of getting up moving around all the time. So you can see that once you cut that off, it just goes right together if you pull on it. Alright, so before you sew it together, you want to open this up and open your little seam up and iron it down flat like we did all the others in the beginning. You don't have to, but it leaves some bulk in there. And that's another reason you cut your strips on the bias. If you cut them straight and you just butt them straight into each other when you're sewing those long strips together, all those folds are on top of each other. Where with the bias, you know, it's not. It's diagonal, so you don't have as much stuff laying on top of each other when you fold it over. So anyway, I'm going to bring my little iron over here. I don't want to burn my sewing machine, but this don't take but a little dab of ironing to get that to lay open. And then make sure it's all ironed. Nice. Finally something worked. So now we've got that little gap. We just need to sew from there to there, and that's done. My finger. Okay. We've sewed that gap shut. Now we're going to move over to the iron. You remember, this is an important step. We're back at the iron, the big iron. Now this is, I think this is one of the most important parts when you get to having a successful binding. I've done it without doing this, and I always kind of make a mess, but I just keep on rolling with it. But probably in the last year, I have always done this, and that is pull your binding like you know it's going to wrap around your quilt, so you're going to start ironing it that way. Iron and get up in them corners. I'll show you on this other one. Iron's not heated up real good, so we'll turn the cord on. Pull this down. Now, see, here's a corner. You want to get right up in that corner as good as you can. Keep that thing going that direction. This is giving you a good start towards turning your binding to the other side of your quilt. I didn't quite get my iron heated up, but anyway, keep on going. Getting up in that corner good. You're going to go around your entire quilt like that. I'm telling you, this is highly important. You will be glad you did it. a little bit of time spent on the front end really helps on the back end. And honestly, this really don't take that long. This is about as big as a quilt gets, I guess. No, not really. I guess this is a queen size quilt. It's a little bit long. A little bit more, I could have made it a king size. But this is for a little girl. So I'm hoping she got a big bed. If not, it's going to hang way over the sides. That's okay too. She'll have it when she's bigger. Keep on going till you know you've got all 4 corners and every side. And you'll know it because they get real crisp. Oops. Creased that one. Alright, almost. Once you get your iron good and hot, it don't take just a few seconds. It wasn't good and hot in the beginning. So once it's hot, you can roll on. Getting up in that corner good. Nice side. We should have biddied this yesterday when you were here. Just didn't think about it. Next time we'll think about that. We're doing something. Okay, I can turn my iron off. We're going to move back over to the sewing machine, and this should be the end of everything. Okay, we're back over here to the machine. Now, this is where I put my handy dandy little zipper foot on. I love to use the zipper foot for this part. Now, doesn't really matter where you start, just don't start in a corner. Come down off the corner, middle ways, not quite middle ways, something. But you're wanting to overlap. You can see the stitches where you sewed the other side. So you want to make sure you're rolling this around far enough that when you sew right down that zipper foot, you can get real close to the edge. You don't want to run off of it. If you do, you'll have to back up and hit it again. But you want to sew right down that edge, and you want that stitching to be on this side of that stitching you did on the back. Okay? If you don't, if it's on this side of it, then your stitching's going to be on the back of your binding. You don't want that. When you look at it on the back side, well, let's put this camera down. When you look at it on the back side, you don't want your stitching to be over here in the red on the binding. You want it to be right here, just on the blue, just going right down beside that binding. And then it just kind of blends in. But if you've got stitching up here on your binding, it sticks out like a sore thumb. But you're going to make those mistakes. That's okay. I did it too, and I still do it once in a while. So it's just a matter of rolling it over enough, sewing right on the edge without going off, and just enough to be on the far edge of the stitching you just did. Okay? So I'll roll it, put it under my foot. And I'm going to put my foot down in the needle. Okay, close to the edge. I want to say that is probably an 1/8 of an inch from the edge, something like that. Maybe a 1/16. It's real close. That's the beauty of a zipper foot. You can get close without running off. I probably couldn't do this with a regular foot. I've done it this way for so long. I don't know if you've ever put in a zipper, but just pretend that's what you're doing. You got to get close to a zipper. Okay. You have to sew it a little bit slow. You got all this bulk that has to come along with you. And you're so close to the edge, it's easy to run off. So try not to do that. If you do, and I might do it before you're done. If you do, we're going to cut your thread and back up and catch it again. You can see that. It is really hard to find the right angle to video this. I need something that would stretch over your telescopic arm so that you could get right down here at my needle. But I don't have that. I've got loose threads in there and I'm just like slide them down so they'll stay in there. I don't have to worry about cutting them off or nothing. And my machine, I don't know if yours will do it or not, I've got my machine set to where when you stop, it automatically stops with the needle down in the fabric. That way it anchors your fabric in place. If yours won't do that, just get in a habit of always trying to stop with your needle down. I almost ran off of it, but I didn't. Getting in a hurry. Trying to get this done because I gotta keep my little granddaughter this evening. She's a handful, so I need to give her some undivided attention. So if she shows up, remember I didn't cut my corners off. Some people do, and if you got something big and bulky there, you can cut it off if you just don't cut down into the stitches. But I think if you can leave it square, it helps keep the corners square looking. But if she shows up while I'm doing this, I may have to stop and come back to it. Alright, I'm going to stop a few inches from the corner. And again, this is where my handy dandy little pokey thing comes in hand. It's because, you know, you want that to come down through as straight as possible. I usually use this to just come down over the edge and hold that down. Now, we'll see if I can get you closer. Now as close as I can get it. Okay, so I'm coming down through there and running down over the edge. That helps me bring that up very square. So when I bring it up, I'm using this just to manipulate it to where those two come together. And when I sew down through here, I want to catch this one by one stitch and stop. So I'm going down through here slow. See, I'm about to lose it there. Get my bearings again. Holding it down. Gotta go slow. Alright, I've got my needle in this piece by one stitch. And my needle is down. So I'm going to raise my foot. Make sure your needle stays down. Raise my foot and turn it around. That needle is holding it all in place. Okay. Now, so what we're going to do is come down through here. But what I do is I put my foot back down. And I usually backspace one stitch. If I do more than one, you can see it on the other side. Back stitch one and then go forward. Right down the side, just like we did on the other side. And that's what we want to do on all four corners. I can tell this is where we joined it, and I didn't iron it real good right there. Get my handy dandy little pointy iron over here. Okay, here we go. Sometimes you feel like you've had a workout when you've done this. When I used to do free motion quilting like you were doing on your machine, that really killed my shoulders. That's another reason I wanted to go long arm, because that killed my shoulders, and I would just as soon hand quilt it. Place kind of got a little wrinkle in the fabric or something. Probably has iron on it. So I'm taking my little pointy thing and just flatten it out as best I can. I'm using it kind of like an iron, just flattening it out. Sometimes you get a little wrinkle or crinkle like that and you worry about it. But it all comes out in the wash. Washing a quilt and it crinkling up takes care of a lot of stuff you worried about. I always wash my quilts before I give them to somebody. Talking about signing your quilt, there's a lot of ways to do that. The majority of mine, I've done a tag and put on it. For years I embroidered that tag. This machine has embroidery on it, so I embroidered those tags, and then I just flip my quilt over on the back and sew it on the back. I usually did it like in a little oval or something. And I would just put, I'll show you one, but I just put like made by Dorothy Greer, whatever the year is, and Sugar Grove, Virginia. That way if anybody ever wonders where it came from, they know. Some people just use a permanent marker and put it on a tag. I'm doing this corner the same way. I'm sliding my little thing off of it, trying to keep it straight, and flipping this one over. I'm going to catch it just barely. I have started recently screen printing, dabbling with a little screen printing. I screen print my signature right on the quilt, usually on the back, somewhere that it doesn't show too much. Now once in a while I'll make a flub up in doing that, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I've fixed this whole quilt and now I messed it up with some paint. But the last one I did that I showed you yesterday, the one with the tie-dye binding, I messed it up. So all I did was I took a piece of fabric that matched and I screen printed it on that and made me a tag and just sewed it right over the part that I messed up. Nobody will ever know the difference. So there's a multitude of ways. I did one for my son a while back. I think I put a picture of it on Facebook. This one with a deer on it. And I screen printed it right on the front of the quilt. You really can't even tell it. But you know that camouflage material, it has writing on it anyway. It says something like real tree or mossy oak or something like that. So I just made it look like that and just screen printed it right on the front. So if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't know it. And I doubt he's even seen it yet. You know, other people don't pay attention to our quilts like we do. You remember to look up that woman that lives in Mouth of Wilson that has a retreat over there. Just look on YouTube. Her name's Bonnie Hunter. And the name of her place is Quiltville. She actually doesn't seem like my favorite kind of person. But I've watched her. She does do good work. But I can't believe that many people come in from out of state to stay over there and do that. Pay that kind of money. But whatever. Maybe when me and you get famous, we'll have our retreat. How about that? And then there's Jenny on Missouri Star. Gosh, I was watching her years ago before she was so famous. They've got really commercial about their business now too, but I like her a lot better than I did Bonnie Hunter. Another good one for you to watch is Alex Anderson. She's one of the first big time quilters ever out there. And she's the one actually made, you know, the rulers that I showed you. It's Quilter Select, I think it's called. Those rulers I have that I like that don't slide. I think she makes those rulers. Alex Anderson. Trying to think who else that I have watched on YouTube. There's a bunch of them. Shabby Fabrics is a good one. Pat Sloan. And then there's a little girl, I think she does awesome work, but you can't hardly understand her. She's a foreigner. It's called Laundry Basket Quilts, I think is what it's called. But she does some really, really pretty stuff, I think. Coming down into this corner again. I'll stop before I get there to try and make sure we're going to be straight on. It's easier to start easing something in and manipulating it if you know ahead of time it's going to happen. So, you know, stop way back here and make sure things are looking right. And if not, you might have to start easing it in one direction or another. Alright, I'm flipping that over. Holding it down. Trying to catch it with one stitch. Whew, this one's being a little bit hateful. Goodness. Got it with one stitch. Okay. Raise my foot. Turn it around. Goodness, how many corners is it? Well, it told me I had reached my maximum recording length. So I had to start it over. But here we go. I'm getting tired now. I feel like I've done about 10 corners. I think I have one more to go. You know, you'll just have to fast forward through this video till you find the spot you want. If you ever have to refer back to it. That's okay. It's better to have too much than not enough. Man, I really think YouTube's one of the best modern day inventions around. We've learned to do a lot on YouTube. Okay, we're almost done. We're coming down on the last corner. Okay, looking at it way ahead, making sure it's going to come down to our straight. Looking good so far. Alright, got my little pointer. Remember, I just slide it off the end. That helps me square it up and roll over. Alright, and then I'm going to hold them corners together until I can come down through there. Slowly get that one with a stitch. Raise my foot. Yay, that's it for corners. Back up one. I'm not sure I remember to do that on the last corner, but I will. We're on the home stretch now. Looky there, No, I thought I ran off of it, but I didn't. Boy, I almost did. Caught it just in time. Look at that, look at it. Yeah, it's okay. It'd be like me to get right down here to the last 2 inches and mess up. Alright, we're on this home stretch. Got to go from there to here. So when you get that far away, you want to stop. Make sure you're not got a lot of excess, or you know it's going to come together good. And it's going to work out. I have seen a time when I thought, man, I've got a lot of extra bulk there, and I don't know where the problem went wrong, but when I did that, I had to go and tear out a little bit down through here just to have more room to ease it in. But this one's coming together pretty good. Cut this little twig off here. Okay, here we go. And then go a few stitches over where you started from, and I'll back up and cut 2 or 3 stitches, and then cut your thread. And guess what? You are done. Now, I know something I did that I shouldn't have done, but I didn't know it until now. It's too late to fix it. Okay, and I'm going to show you what that is. So, and usually I remember this, but I guess just making a video and stuff, I had to get away with me. But, okay, so my quilt is blue, my binding is red, and I've got red thread. Okay, so I did both sides in red. When I flip it over, you can see that red thread running down through there. That's a mess up. What I was supposed to have done was change my bobbin thread to blue. Then it would have been blue on the bottom, red on top. Okay, red on top is on my red binding, so that looks good. Over here, had I had blue in there, you wouldn't even have seen that line. So try to remember to put blue, you know, whatever your bottom color is, put something that matches it in your bottom after you flip it around. I wish I'd have done that. So see, that looks kind of ugly. When you see it like that, you can see everywhere that you maybe got a little bit of crooked or something. Can you see that? So if it had been blue, we wouldn't even have seen that. But you know what? It's too late. I'm not ripping that out. Now, I've seen a time I would have ripped that out, but I'm over that. If I make a mistake, unless it's horrible, I just go with it, and you'll get there too. Okay, I can't think of anything else. The next thing would be putting a label or something on there as a signature. I think you can figure something out there. I don't need to walk you through that, but if so, we'll do that later. And I'll just throw this quilt out here on the floor and show you what it looks like. And we're all done. Oh, and then you can see the borders I put on it. Okay. Maybe you can see that. Let me turn my camera. Whoops. My camera's floppy. And I can't see what you're seeing, so I hope you're seeing that. But, you know, you were talking about cornerstones and stuff. I usually don't even do a cornerstone. I just do borders. I do border on the side and then the top. And like I'll do, so my red border was a 2-inch border, I think. Then my white border was a 4-inch, and my blue was 6, something like that, and then my stars was 8. So I usually just make them get gradually bigger. Okay. Until next time, we'll get together and we'll learn something else. See ya.